This happened a while ago, but my then girlfriend, now wife, Mary, has finally given me permission to share this. It happened in the mid-80s. I was 18 and she was 17, and we had just started going around together. It was the middle of summer and we had just finished school. I held down a job as an apprentice mechanic while she worked as a receptionist at her father's company. And this meant that we didn't get as much spare time together as we would have liked. However, the perfect opportunity for a weekend getaway arose with a long weekend on a federal holiday, and I was able to convince her with only minimal pestering that we should go for the weekend to camp in a popular national park. When that weekend arrived, I packed my truck with all the supplies that we would need, and I drove around to her place. I waited patiently on the front porch for her to be ready, while her father stood with arms crossed and a hard glare. When she was finally ready, at least 4 eternities later, she said goodbye to her father and he gave me a stern handshake with a gruff, "You look after her," to which I agreed vehemently that I would. Being the father of 2 now adult women myself, I understand his concerns, but I would be lying if I said that he didn't scare the crap out of me, and if he still did a little now. However, once we hit the open road, we were gone without a care in the world. Making our way through picturesque countryside, we sang along to the radio with our windows down, until we were good and wind beat, playing monotonous travel games until we ran out of items to guess, and I let her nap when she fell asleep, leaning against the passenger side window. While she slept, I got a little turned around. There were no turns on the road where I thought there should have been, and we ended up going straight for a long time, where there weren't any familiar landmarks. As the car began to run low on gas, I decided that I would pull off into the next gas station that I saw, which, as it turned out, wasn't too much farther down the road. Its neon lights drew me in like a beacon in the night, but as I approached, I saw that it was quite run down. There was a layer of grimy dust over everything. The fuel prices were outrageous. The neon light was missing a couple of letters and a single moth flew repeatedly into light above the service attendant. Suffice to say, if my car wasn't dying for a drink, we wouldn't have stopped here. I left Mary asleep in the car while I filled it up, and I locked the car out of paranoia when I went in to pay and asked for directions. Inside, the attendant looked just as washed up as the station did. It was a guy around my age with an absent expression on his face, and our conversation went something like this. Gas on pump 3 and a pack of Skittles too. And could you tell me which direction so-and-so National Park is? I asked directly, though not rudely. That'll be $50.90. He spoke in a heavy drawl of a country accent, and just pointed down the road in response to my question. Oh, okay, thanks, and good evening to you. I said uncertainly, but I decided just to go with it and reconsult the map if necessary. There was a long pause for a moment, and I was almost out of the store before he spoke up again. You be careful out there in so-and-so forest. The way he said it was unsettling, and I hesitated a moment, unsure of how to respond. In the end, I gave an awkward nod of thanks and I left a little quicker, while reflecting on the strange conversation and the exorbitant prices. However, when I came out and I looked at the car, my heart leapt in my throat. The passenger door was open and Mary wasn't in the car. Mary! I called with a wave of concern raising from my stomach, as I jogged back to the car at a considerable pace. What? She answered almost immediately, and sounded just as panicked as she had picked up on the strain in my voice. I whirled around confused to see her behind me coming from the direction of the bathrooms. Why did you leave the car door open? I demanded, worry giving way to hot embarrassment and uncertainty. She apologized for scaring me and then explained that she hadn't left the door open. My initial thought at the time was that we had been robbed, but upon searching the vehicle, I saw that nothing was out of place or otherwise missing. We assumed that she may have in fact just not closed the door as firmly as she thought, and that it had swung open after her. And this was really the only rational explanation that would calm our nerves enough to get back in and keep driving. We traveled down the dark road until the asphalt gave way to gravel, and we passed signs pointing to our intended destination. The camp itself was actually pretty easy to find once we had an idea of where we were going, though setting up in the dark was a little spooky. Mary held the light while I pitched the tent and I lit the fire. Overall, I would say that first night ended up being pretty romantic. The mild state of fear put her into a clingy mood and I was only too happy to oblige. The only thing I can say that might have been some indication of what was to come is that when I went to get the tent out of the back of my truck, the tarp canopy over the tray was loose, not entirely undone or anything, and there was obviously nothing in the tray other than our supplies. But it's something that I look back on now and I wonder about. It could have come loose from the travel, sure, but then again, I didn't check it at the gas station, so who really knows? The following day, we woke up early to the welcoming sounds of morning songbirds and we ate breakfast, which was a gourmet assortment of beans and toast, in the company of a field mouse. As it turned out, we had chosen a pretty good campsite in the dark. Situated near the edge of a clearing, there was a decent patch around us with a clear view across the river, over to the hillside with deer grazing and thick woods behind us. Activities for the day included frolicking in the river and hiking. We settled into the evening drinking around a fire with neighboring campers and exchanging stories. Our newfound friends, a couple of guys named Joe and Patrick, were excited to share stories about their experience the day prior. They had encountered the odd fellow at the gas station as well, but Joe told us in a more hushed tone that other strange things had happened to them since arriving. They had heard footsteps crunching the leaves around their caravan late at night, and seen unidentifiable shapes moving between the trees at dusk. This was about the time that Mary added in that while we were on our hike, she had felt watched, or like we were being followed, and had kept glancing behind us just to make sure. As she spoke, I could tell she was sincerely spooked, though she kept her voice jovial. Patrick noticed too, and he was quick to interject that it was probably nothing more than the wildlife. Joe, however, was equally as eager to inform us that he had grown up in the area, and that this forest had a reputation for missing campers. Of the campers that had been found, their bodies were always discovered mangled beyond recognition. Some were found seemingly skewered at the top of impossibly tall trees, while others had been strung up by their feet and torn apart. All circumstances of death were mysterious, and while each case had an official explanation, many locals suspected the police department was covering something up since most explanations were a stretch at best. The conversation died off pretty quickly with that information, and Mary and I returned to our campsite. She was unsettled and even suggested that maybe we should leave. I reassured her as best I could, promising that if anything unusual started to happen, that we could leave. And my drunken charm somehow managed to convince her, since it was only one more night anyways. To be honest though, I only didn't want to leave yet because I was hoping to get laid. Under the guise of watching the stars, I laid down blankets and pillows in the tray of the truck and we laid down together to snuggle. Naturally, things went the way that I had hoped, and before long, we were getting pretty heated. She was on top and down to her underwear. when we heard a soft snap from the forest. At hearing the twig break, she stopped and started to sit up. In my horny state, I did my very best to convince her that it was nothing, but the sound of bushes rustling was undeniable. There was something moving towards us from the brush. At this point, I sat up and I gently pushed her off of me to the side and half behind me. I assumed that maybe Joe or Patrick were drunkenly wandering over to us, so I hurried to put my pants back on and to find the flashlight while she struggled to find her shirt. She didn't have much luck with that since I had thrown it haphazardly away at some earlier point, so she stayed pretty closely hidden behind me to preserve her dignity. However, once I turned the light and I pointed in the direction of the sound, the noises stopped. It was then that we realized that it was dead silent. Not a single insect, bird, or otherwise mammalian creature dared with a peep. This is what truly terrified me. One of the most basic human instincts we have is that utter silence is bad. I scanned the foliage with the torch slowly. I could hear Mary barely breathing behind me, and I realized that I myself was holding my breath as the beam of light shone over empty leaves and branches. The moment it landed on something in the darkness is a moment that I'll never forget. Set back between the trees was a pair of round eyes reflecting back at us. They were maybe 100 yards away, if that, and approximately the height you would expect to see a deer standing. Both Mary and I froze as we stared down this thing in the darkness, trying to determine what we thought it was. And then it stood up. We saw the eyes elevate from deer height to what the hell are we seeing height. This thing stood tall, 7 or 8 feet by my best estimation in the dark at a distance. And then it screamed. Now when I say screamed, I mean it let out the most unholy screech that I'd ever heard. It was simultaneously high-pitched and reverberatingly deep. It shook me to my core, and to this day, neither of us have heard anything even remotely similar, or have been able to accurately describe the harrowing sound that it made. Mary and I sat petrified for a moment, before we realized the creature was now running headlong at us, crashing through the undergrowth with fury. I only caught glimpses of what it looked like. It was a mixture of bare skin and tattered patches of fur, gaping wide loose hanging jaw of a mouth and sunken and oblong-shaped eyes with distinctive cheekbones. Sometimes at night I still wake up in a cold sweat, imagining it coming for me or sitting in the dark of my room just beyond the light of my phone screen. At the time, however, we scrambled our half-naked selves out of the bed and into the front seats of the truck. I fumbled frantically with the keys and pedals, trying not to stall the thing while Mary chattered frantically about the impending hell creature getting closer. She told me later that it had almost reached the tail of the truck before I put it into gear and we tore off down the road at dangerous speeds. It's really a miracle that we made it out in one piece, considering how inebriated I was, and how many times I felt the back end slide out on the gravel as we drifted around bends in the road. I didn't stop driving that night until we were more than halfway home. We bypassed the creepy gas station in favor of another one more populated and in a well-lit town that we at least knew of. I'm pretty sure we looked ridiculous. 2 shell-shocked people staggering out of a dirty, scratched-up car, barely clothed and wide-eyed. When I tried to have a smoke to calm my nerves, my hands were shaking so bad that I could hardly get it to my lips, and when the clerk asked what had happened, neither of us made any sense in our explanations. We checked into a hotel for the night, and made it home earlier than planned the next day. Neither of us mentioned anything to her parents. In fact, she forbid me from mentioning the story until now, out of a combination of embarrassment and fear. I was only able to convince her to allow this now because, recently, a group of high school kids disappeared in that forest. According to the news report, 4 went in and only 1 came out. The surviving teen was institutionalized for babbling incoherently about a monster in the forest. My wife and I know that they're not crazy. We also know this means that whatever we saw is still out there, somewhere.